Leading Britain's conversation. Nick Abbot. Alexa, send a comment to LBC.
LBC's US correspondent is Simon Marks, and he joins us on the line now. Hello, Simon.
Evening, Nick.
I believe there's big news from the prestigious Donald Trump YMCA FIFA Kennedy Center for Dad Dancing.
Absolutely breathtaking news that the President of the United States has just announced within the last few minutes over his social media feed. Remember the Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts?
Yes.
One of the world's leading arts institutions that since 1971, when it opened as a living memorial to the assassinated President John F. Kennedy, has been a home for some of the world's leading artists, performers, musicians, dancers, until, of course, Donald Trump affixed his name to the Kennedy Center without any congressional approval, as is legally required. So it's now called the Trump Kennedy Center, to the fury of the Kennedy family. Well, within the last few minutes, Donald Trump has announced it's going to close for 2 years from July the 4th of this year. He says that after a 1-year review of the Trump Kennedy Center, he has decided that if the building is temporarily closed for construction, revitalization and complete rebuilding, it can then become the finest performing arts facility of its kind anywhere in the world. In other words, he says, if we don't close, the quality of construction will not be nearly as good, and the time to completion, because of interruptions with audiences from the many events using the facility, will be much longer. He insists the temporary closure, temporary for 2 years at least, will produce a much faster and higher quality result. Now, those are the false alternative facts that are being trafficked by the President this evening. The reality is that since the complex was renamed the Trump Kennedy Center, audiences have eschewed it. Performers have dropped out in droves. Only last week, the composer Philip Glass announced that he wasn't going to allow his new symphony to be premiered at the Kennedy Center later this year. The entire cast of Hamilton has pulled out. The Washington Ballet has pulled out after having based themselves at the Kennedy Center since it opened in 1971. They're upping sticks and taking off. And if you actually look, and I was looking at this a few days ago, at the calendar for what's on at the Kennedy Center, I mean, there is very, very little on for the summer season that is coming up. And so what Donald Trump has done is decided that in the face of this abject disaster, with performers pulling out and musicians pulling out and dancers pulling out and composers pulling out and audiences staying away, he is now going to close this country's premier performing arts complex for at least the next 2 years, and presumably engage in some kind of reconstruction that I would imagine is going to make it look be similar to the demolition of the East Wing of the White House. And just to be clear, this is a gorgeous facility. I mean, there's nothing they need to do to it. It is in tremendous shape. It's not that old. It, as I say, opened in 71. Liquor paint here, bit of new moulding there, and they'd have it fixed up. This is a fit of peak by the Philistine in chief who is governing this country. And I think that it's going to have just a devastating impact, particularly here in Washington, D.C. But I think there's huge questions, of course, for Republicans in Congress, because it is a congressionally funded facility, and he doesn't actually have the right to do this. So are they going to stand up along with the quislings that he's placed on the board? I believe Melania is the chairman of the board now. And it was only a few weeks ago that he said he was surprised when the board had honoured him by naming the complex after him.
Wow.
And members of the Kennedy family said they would be standing by with a pickaxe to remove his name from the exterior of the building as soon as he left the presidency. Yeah. So that's the breaking news from here tonight.
And that Philip Glass piece was going to be a premiere of his new piece about Lincoln.
Right, exactly.
I'm sure that Trump wouldn't have liked to have been, upstaged by a better president.
Well, look, they just can't fill the centre with acts. I mean, they've put this zealous Trump supporter, Rick Grenell, in charge of the place. It was only last week that they appointed a new director who was going to be responsible for booking acts. I forget the title of this guy, but they brought some fella in from the West Coast who they said was going to be responsible for bringing premiere acts to the Kennedy Center. Now, why on earth would you have made that appointment if you truly thought you were going to keep this complex open, if you truly thought you were about to close the complex?
Yes.
So they've obviously come to the conclusion very quickly that they just can't book sufficient stars that are ever going to put bums on seats in that vast theatre. I mean, even he attended the premiere of Melania the second time he went to see it, the film, the other night at the Kennedy Center, and even there they struggled. I mean, they obviously frog-marched every single Trump supporter in town they could find into the building, and the pictures showed that there were all sorts of empty seats throughout the auditorium. So, I mean, but it's a tragedy for Washington, D.C., this, and particularly for visitors, because the Kennedy Center, of course, has been a magnet, like the Smithsonian Museums in the center of the city, where he's ordered an audit of every single artifact and exhibit to make sure that it aligns with his own personal view of history. I mean, he is laying waste to the cultural landmarks in this city.
But at least Melania is showing at some locations near you, and tickets are still available.
Tickets are still available, but, you know, it's done better than I think many people imagined that it might.
Suspiciously well, I think.
Suspiciously well.
I don't believe this story. I think this is fake news.
It looks like they brought in about $7 million in opening weekend ticket sales,
right?
Which is apparently unprecedented for a documentary, if indeed one truly considers this film a documentary. And to be fair, I should say I have not yet seen it. I am planning to go.
Oh, you are? Are you? Really?
Well, I've decided it's sort of my professional duty to go and see it. Yeah,
right.
I've been mulling it over, but I've decided it's my professional. Yeah, I'll do it on expenses. So I'll go and see it. So they brought in $7 million over the weekend. Now, bear in mind, you know, Amazon spent $40 million making it. I mean, a lot of which, of course, went to Melania because she's not only the star, but she's the executive producer. They then, sensing that it was not going to do very well, ploughed another $35 million into trying to get, lots of advertising and try and pre-game the outcome of all of this. But, you know, for Amazon and Jeff Bezos, this was never about the money that he was spending on the documentary. It was about the favour that he was buying in the court of Trump by giving the First Lady something to do. And not just this film, by the way. This is just the start. There's a 5-part docu-series that will follow, apparently, for Amazon. No. There's more of it.
About Melania?
About Melania, that she will be completely heading up and starring in, and, you know, her life as First Lady.
Well,
so strap yourself in.
No, I won't. I keep a Trump bingo card going on my Friday and Saturday shows, and the latest thing to get the entry this year is Trump is going to demand a documentary about him.
Well, I know it's a Sunday, but I'll put on your bingo card that the 5-part docu-series is never made in full.
Right.
How about that?
Okay. Let's talk about this poor kid, this 5-year-old child who got arrested in his own driveway and was used as bait to get his dad out by Trump's ICE goons. And a local judge said, you must release this 5-year-old child immediately. Of course you must. And the ICE goons ignored it and sent him to Texas, which was a completely different state. What's happened now?
Now the father and the 5-year-old have been ordered to be released from detention in Texas, and they have been flown back to Minneapolis and reunited with the family. The story is on its face a disgrace. and it underscores the fact that ICE and the Border Patrol are basically operating as the personal paramilitary forces of the President of the United States and constantly violating court orders, to the point where the chief judge in Minnesota last week said that in the space of January alone, he thought it was likely that ICE had violated more court orders than any other federal agency has violated in its entire existence. This 5-year-old, Liam Conejo Ramos, and his father, Adrian, were taken into custody when ICE made a targeted effort to pull the father in as a suspected illegal immigrant. But he was driving home from school with the 5-year-old in his car. They pulled into the driveway and immediately ICE set on them. The father made a run for it. The ICE agents then used the 5-year-old. They used a 5-year-old boy as bait to try and get the mother, who was inside the house, to come out so that they could detain her as well. And remember that they're not allowed legally to enter a home without an arrest warrant, although they've been doing that all over the country for many, many weeks now. The mother refused to come out. ICE held on to the kid. They caught the father, and they took the 5-year-old and the father and put them on a plane and sent them to Texas, and were preparing to deport them. Now, when they were arrested, this family was in the process of going through immigration hearings to see whether they could win permission to stay in the United States. So the judge in the case has said, well, hang on a second, they're in the middle of that process. You can't interrupt that. You've got to free the kid. You've got to free the father. They go back to Minneapolis and they remain in that legal process. So there were very touching scenes today. The little boy was allowed by the pilots of the plane that brought him home into the cockpit of the plane. And they made a big deal of that and gave him a chance to, play with the controls and play, not before the plane took off, and they gave him the cockpit experience and treated him like
even though that 5-year-old child is a terrorist maniac.
I mean, it's just, or as Kristi Noem, the Secretary of Homeland Security, described protesters and illegal immigrants in the United States. She described them today as violent monsters, which, by the way, gives you a sense that when Donald Trump said earlier in the week that he was going to de-escalate things in Minneapolis, and there were all of these reports that the White House was softening its tone towards ICE and Border Patrol operations, as Donald Trump himself 24 hours later then said he hadn't meant it, and they don't mean it, and things are as hazardous, I think, on the streets of Minneapolis and other cities in terms of the safety of not only illegal immigrants but American citizens who are participating in protests and legal acts of observation, as they were when Alex Pretty was killed and as they were when Renee Good was killed in January.
Well, I think you should go to a safe space. I think the safest space is probably at a screening of Melania. There won't be anybody else there. Simon?
Go and hide out there.
Yes. All the best. Thanks for that. Simon Marks, LBC's Washington correspondent.